This is Aditi from Cloudlytics. First of all, a very warm welcome to all of you in this webinar, and we're really pleased to have you here. This webinar, Manage Cloud Security and Compliance of AWS Account Using CloudTrail, will be presented by Stanny. He's a cloud engineer with Cloudlytics. Before I hand over the webinar to Stanny, I would like to just bring your attention to a couple of points. First of all our participants are on mute on entry. This is just to ensure that the best quality of audio is delivered. In case you have any questions about any part of the webinar, please do share it in the chat window. I also have Anuj, who is also a cloud engineer with Cloudlytics. He will be answering them at the best speed that he can. If all questions do not get answered, we will be answering them towards the end of the webinar. Now I will hand over the webinar to Stanny, and he'll take it forward. Just one last point. We will be sharing the webinar presentation and the recording over email in 2 working days. Stanny is a cloud engineer. He's been working on Cloudlytics for the past year, more than a year, and he's had a big contribution to the development of Cloudlytics as an analytics and management.
Hello everyone, and once again thank you for joining this webinar. For those of you all who don't know what Cloudlytics is basically a SaaS product from Placeline Technologies. It is a log analytics tool that processes and provides analytics for logs of CloudTrail, CloudFront, S3, and ELB. As of now, Cloudlytics has also started providing analytics on AWS Build. The agenda for this webinar is to help you all understand the need of an audit trail, the use of an audit trail from a security perspective, a brief introduction to the service that AWS provides, that is CloudTrail, how to enable CloudTrail in your AWS account, and how Cloudlytics will help you better and where Cloudlytics fits in your CloudTrail log analysis. If you see today, around 80% of the IT industry leverages the cloud services in some form or the other, out of which 40% are onto the public cloud. So the question that arises here is our data secure out there? Are we taking enough steps so that we understand or that we believe that our data there is secure? Here are a few facts that I've been able to pull out and I would like to share with you all. The average cost of a data breach in 2014 was around 3.5 million. On an average, a company is attacked nearly over 60,000 times. The scariest part of these facts is that 90% of these hacks happen within 9 hours, and the companies nearly take 3 to 4 months to even understand that their data has been breached, their security has been breached. And you can see that the numbers here are quite large. But in the coming years, this data or this security breach that is happening is to grow exponentially. So as John Chambers here, the CEO of Cisco, has predicted that this year is going to be much worse than the last year. So is the situation all that bad? As per IBM services, a majority, like for here is 43%, 43% of the attacks that are happening or the data breaches that are happening are mainly because of the employees or the negligence of the employees that are using the resources within your infrastructure. So if in some way we were capable of making our employees accountable for their role in the maintaining the security of their data, we could somehow avoid or curb such threats. Another amusing fact is that 92% of the data breaches that are happening can be identified into 9 distinct patterns. That is, there are a definite set of patterns that can be understood, that can be followed to understand whether our data is being breached or there's a breach in a security. So this role or this way in which we understand the audit trail. In the sense here is that audit trail is something that will help you understand what is happening in your infrastructure. In simple words, audit trail is nothing but a recording kind of a system that will record each and every activity that is happening in your infrastructure. So this recording of data is done in the chronological record or in the chronological way. So you understand how and when activities were taking place in your infrastructure. Now, if we do have a cloud trail, in the sense, if we do have an audit trail, how can we make proper use of it? Or what is the purpose of an audit trail? Using an audit trail, you can actually maintain individual accountability. That is, you can pinpoint the entity that can be a cause of some problem in your infrastructure. By overgoing or analyzing the logs in your audit trail, you can understand the patterns of access that are being made into your infrastructure. You can detect intrusions. So if you can detect the intrusions, you can also ensure security in your infrastructure. Now, audit trail is not only important from the perspective of security, it can also help you in terms of understanding operational defects in your infrastructure. For example, if you have a new software update that you have done in your infrastructure, maybe not properly tested, and that has caused your infrastructure to fail or your application to cease to work, you can actually go back in your trail logs, understand the events, recreate those events, and understand the cause of the events that have actually caused your infrastructure or your application to go down. So, in other words, audit trail will work as a CCTV camera to your infrastructure. It will help you understand and monitor your activities that are happening in your infrastructure. It will help you control your infrastructure. Audit trails in AWS has answered using CloudTrail. It was a service that was released in November 2013. CloudTrail is nothing but a service that records all the API calls that are being made in your infrastructure. Now, everything that you do may be using the console, maybe using your CLI, maybe using your SDK. Any of the calls that you make are simple API calls, and those API calls are recorded by CloudTrail. Some of the information as shown on the slide that are recorded by CloudTrail include the identity of the API caller, the time that the API call was made, the source IP address of the API caller, and the request and the response of that API call. So in short, a CloudTrail record or CloudTrail will help you answer the questions of like who did what, when, and from where in your infrastructure. CloudTrail, as of now, is supported in these regions. Some of the services, as of now, not all services are supported by CloudTrail, but we do have a long list of the services that is actually being supported. Let's take an example of, say, Amazon EC2. How will a record with Amazon EC2 help us in CloudTrail? Like I said earlier, a CloudTrail log will log information related to requests that are being made to your infrastructure or your account, the time of the request, the user identity, the access keys that were used by your SDK or your the CLI, the requests and the responses that were sent by those API calls. Suppose, let's take an example of your EC2 instance. An EC2 instance is a very integral part of your infrastructure. You can use it for your development purpose. You may use it in your production servers. So you would actually want to know things or activities that are being done related to your EC2 instance. So suppose you notice that there are continuous reboots that are happening in your instance, or your instance has been stopped, or worst case, maybe your instance gets terminated. So you would actually want to know what has caused this kind of, say, API calls, or what entity has made such kind of calls that has caused your instance to go down. So here's a simple example of a record related to EC2 that is logged in your CloudTrail logs. Like I said, CloudTrail helps you answer the questions of who did what, when, and from where. So if you see here, we have an element called as the user identity. The user identity helps you answer the question of who. So you can say that Alice, that is the username, who is an IAM user, did what. So you can see the event name. She stopped instances, when, the event time, and from where, that is the source IP address. There's some additional information that is provided in these logs, that is your request parameters and also your response elements. So you can say that Alice, as an IAM user, stopped the instance, that is here you can see the instance ID. So this is the instance at so and so time. So when you talk about security and compliances, there are certain common questions across these compliances that need to be answered. So say, who initiated an action, time of the action, what action was taken, and where was the action performed. So based on the description that I gave in the previous slide, you can see that CloudTrail is actually answering all of these questions. So it helps you meet the security compliances. So these, you can see, is answered by CloudTrail. I've just taken a few examples from HIPAA and PCI. You can see that between these two requirements, you need a mechanism that records and examines the activities of the information systems. And if you see if PCI, it requires that the user log on and log off events are to be recorded. So in short, requirements where, where all the activities that are happening in your infrastructure or your information system needs to be recorded, and even the user activities needs to be recorded. So here I'll again give an example of how we can enable CloudTrail in the region of Oregon. You click on Get Started. If you want to create a new S3 bucket to which the log files will be delivered, you can just write the name of the S3 bucket. Or if you do already have a bucket, you choose No, and you can select any of the buckets where you would like the log files to be delivered. The another option that we have is log prefix. Log prefix is not necessary as such, but if you would like to, you can add a prefix to it. The next option that we have is about SNS notification. So what CloudTrail does is, CloudTrail delivers logs to AWS every 5 minutes from the time an API call was made. So suppose an API call was made, this API call is logged within the next 5 minutes, and it will be delivered to your S3 bucket maybe within the next 15 to 20 minutes. So a latency of around 15 to 20 minutes might be there. So if you want to know as and when a log file is delivered, or you would like to be notified when a log file is delivered to your bucket, you can say yes. You add the topic, your SNS topic here. So every time a log file is delivered to your account, to your S3 bucket, a notification will be sent to the SNS topic. You can programmatically subscribe to this topic for SQS or maybe email. So once you're done with these settings, you just say turn on, and your CloudTrail will be set up for that region, and CloudTrail will begin to log activities for that particular region. A thing to note is that if there are no logs, in the sense if there are no API calls being made to that region, no log files will be generated and no log files will be delivered to that S3 bucket. Now that we know how to enable a CloudTrail service in your in your AWS account. Let's move on to Cloudlytics and understand how Cloudlytics will actually help you. So like I mentioned earlier, Cloudlytics is a log analysis tool for AWS. Cloudlytics will actually analyze all your CloudTrail logs. It will go through the vast majority of your log files. It will churn it, and it will display the data in a more understandable manner in the form of graphs, in the form of tabular data, so that you can actually identify access patterns in your infrastructure and help you take proper decisions. Cloudlytics, as of now, supports or provides 4 types of reports. That is the overview report, EC2 Activity Report, user audit report, and the custom report. So I'll just give a brief description of each of the reports that we have. An overview report is more like a report that gives you a bird's eye view of the things that are happening in your infrastructure. It will provide you with information regarding the top 5 users, the top 5 IP addresses, the top 5 access keys, the services that are being used in your infrastructure. Another important thing that will be shown in your overview is the timeline in which unauthorized calls or accesses were being made to your AWS account. It will also provide you with the location from where this unauthorized access were being made. The next report is the EC2 Activity Report that we have. This report mainly concentrates on accesses that were being made to your EC2 instance. So any of the activities or API calls related to an instance will be shown here. So a few of the things that it shows is the list of instances to which API calls were made, activities that were related to a certain instance. So if you provide the certain specific instance, all these the services that are being used in your infrastructure. Another important thing that will be shown in your overview is the timeline in which unauthorized calls or accesses were being made to your AWS account. It will also provide you with the location from where this unauthorized access were being made. The next report is the EC2 Activity Report that we have. This report mainly concentrates on accesses that were being made to your EC2 instance. So any of the activities or API calls related to an instance will be shown here. So a few of the things that it shows is the list of instances to which API calls were made, activities that were related to a certain instance. So if you provide the certain specific instance, all the activities related to that instance will be shown. The user access pattern, that is which users in your infrastructure had access to that instance, and if any errors or API calls that were made in that EC2 instance. The next report that we have is the user audit report. This report actually concentrates on tracking user activities in your account. It will help you understand which user made what call, when, and at what time. So it gives you a list of activities related to the user, geographical location from where the user accessed or made the API calls, the access keys that were used by the user. Now there might be certain queries or certain facts that might have not been answered by the previous reports. So we have come up with another report called as the custom report, where the user is capable of defining his own query and generate reports. In the sense, he can actually generate data as per his needs and as per his wish. So before I continue with how to enable or how to use Cloudlytics, in order to actually use Cloudlytics, there are 3 steps that you'll need to do. You would want to create a new user in your IAM console. So say for example, you create a user an IAM user called Cloudlytics. We recommend that you create a separate user so that it helps you track the activities of Cloudlytics. It will help you understand what Cloudlytics is doing in your environment. And we ask for only specific permissions to download files from your account. So you can actually keep a track if you have a separate user related to Cloudlytics. Once you have generated a user, you can attach a policy that will be provided by Cloudlytics to that user. And then you generate a secret key, an access key, which will be further on used in Cloudlytics to enable Cloudlytics to analyze your log files. So let me just continue with the Cloudlytics. So I already have a user that has been configured with Cloudlytics. So as I said earlier, Cloudlytics provides log analysis for CloudFront, S3, ELB, CloudTrail, and has also started providing analytics related to AWS builds. So for now, I would directly start with CloudTrail. Here I've configured CloudTrail for 3 regions, that is US East 1, US West, and EU West, from different account numbers, that is different accounts on AWS. And these are details related to the processing of your logs. So what I'll do is I'll show you how you can add a service with Cloudlytics. So choosing a service is quite simple. Now what we want to do is configure CloudTrail with AWS. So we choose CloudTrail, we say next. The policy that I was talking about in the previous slide is this. This policy is something that is to be attached to the IAM user that you create. So you can see that we ask for only specific accesses in your environment. That is something that will help us download your log files from the specific bucket and nothing else. And a few permissions to describe the trails or the CloudTrail configurations that you've done in your account. Once you have attached this policy and you have generated the secret key and access key, you just need to add them here. So this is an access key and a secret key that I have generated for one of the users with Cloudlytics. And we have also given you detailed steps that will help you actually attach the policy, help you understand how to do it. Once you've added the secret key and the access key, you click on next. So you will be listed if you have enabled CloudTrail in all of the regions. All the regions in which CloudTrail has been enabled will be shown here. If you have enabled in 2 regions, only those 2 regions will be listed here. So if you want Cloudlytics to analyze, say, US West 1, you click on the trail name. And you see you get details related to that bucket. As you can see, I have already configured this CloudTrail with Cloudlytics for this region. So it already gives you a message saying that has already been configured. If it was not configured, you would just get a button here that says start analyzing. You click it, and that is all you need to do to get started with Cloudlytics in processing your CloudTrail reports. Now, if you do want real-time processing, that is the SMS notification that I spoke about, you can actually say yes. You attach this policy to the previous policy, where we actually ask for permissions related to receiving messages from your SQS and delete the messages. Once you have created the SMS notification, you have subscribed to the specific topic, and you have generated the SQS for it, you just add the SQS name here and click on Start Analyzing. This is how simple it is to start with Cloudlytics. So the reports that we provide on Cloudlytics is, like I said, related to CloudFront. We have S3, we have cost analysis, we have ELB, we have CloudTrail. So one of the reports that we provide with CloudTrail is the overview report. Like I said earlier, an overview report is a report that gives you a bird's eye view of your infrastructure. You can actually switch between accounts. You can also switch between regions in those accounts. You can choose the time in which you would like to know the details. And here is a timeline view of the calls or the API number of API calls that were made from Feb 4th to say Feb 27th. So this is more like understanding the number of API calls that were made in your infrastructure. So you can see there was a spike on Feb 17th. This is a list of services that were used in your infrastructure and the count of them. So this is something very important where we show a timeline view of unauthorized accesses that were attempted in your infrastructure. You can see there is a spike around Feb 20th. There were 145 unauthorized accesses that were attempted in my infrastructure. You can also understand the location from which these accesses were being made. The next part that we provide is a list of the users that are being used in my infrastructure. If I want to know, say, Preeti J here is a user that is using my infrastructure, I click on her, and I can get a list of the services that she's using, say EC2 and Elastic Load Balancer. Similarly, we provide the top 5 services that are being used in my infrastructure. So I can see EC2 is being used a lot. I want to know who is using it. I click on EC2, and I get details of the users who are using EC2. The next report that we provide are the top 5 access keys that are being used in your infrastructure. So you can actually sort them easily and understand. Say there's an IAM user, new VM user, who is using the access key the most to access services in your account. The top 5 addresses and the counts. Now we know that there are a lot of unauthorized calls that are being made in my infrastructure, and I want to know a bit more in detail of what is happening. I click on the date that I would like to know details about, and I'll be redirected to my user audit report where I get details of user activities in my infrastructure. So I know here this new VM user is a user who's made 145 unauthorized calls in my infrastructure between the dates of Feb 20 to 21st. So if I want to know a bit more in detail about him, I click on that user and I'll get detailed report of the EC2 or the API calls that user was making. So you can see a list tag for resource was being used for RDS on so-and-so date from the source IP address, the country, the request, the response, and the error message. So you can see here that new VM user was not authorized to perform this. So I get the list of accesses that were being tried by him. By choosing here, we can actually understand, we can segregate or filter out API calls that we would want. Say I want only unauthorized calls, so I click on this. If I want to see only authorized calls, I click on this. And if I want to know all the calls that are being made in my infrastructure, I say all. So a list of all the instances, irrespective of they being authorized or unauthorized, will be listed here. Next, what I am shown is the geographical locations from where the user was actually making these calls. the access key that was used by this user. So I want to know a bit more in detail about the access key that this user used. I click on the access key and I get details of the calls that were made at this time using this access key. The timeline, the usage of this access key, and the geographical location of the access key. Now, many a times, if you see here, the events that are being listed are described and list and such read-only events. Many a times, the user is not concerned about viewing such kind of events. So if we provide an option in which you can actually disable listing of such read-only events. So as of now, I have said yes to including read-only events. So I say no. I'll be listed with only events that are other than the read-only events. So say between 20 and 21st, no such calls were made. So I choose a range, say this month. So these are the list of users who have actually made calls other than read-only events. So I want to know a bit more in detail. Similar to the previous one, I click on the user. I'll be provided the details of the activities or the API calls that the user made. So these API calls, if you see modification, authorization of the security groups, create a security group. So these actions are something that actually bring about modification in your infrastructure, in your settings. So this is quite important to know. So we also know from where these changes were made, the source IP address, from which country, the request parameter that was sent, and the response that was sent back for that API call. The geographical location from where the calls were made, and the list of the access keys that were actually used by the user. Similarly, if I want to know a bit more in detail, I click on the access key and I'll get details related to the access key. The usage pattern of the access key and the geographical location of the access key. So actually this report helps you track your activities of the users in your environment. So this helps your security to understand or meet the compliances related to the security. Next report that we have is our EC2 report. An EC2 report is a report that mainly concentrates on activities related to an EC2 instance. So I choose a range, say this month. I choose a different account, and I'll be listed with the EC2 instances that are running in that account. So you see, I can see details, the instance ID, the number of event calls that were made on that instance, the last user who made or accessed this instance at what time, the user type, and a small detail of who created the instance. So you can see that this instance was created by a user, Devang, who is of type IAM user, on so and so date. So I want to know a bit more in detail about this instance, about activities happening on this instance. I click on that instance, and I'll be provided details related to that specific instance. So I can see the access keys that were being used by Devang to access the instance, the activities that he did on that instance, the request and the response that was sent using that API call, the pattern of accesses that were being made by the user, the error codes, if any, related to that instance, and we have something called as a custom report here. So a use case for this is like, suppose you have an environment in which you're running an EC2 instance, you're hosting a lot of websites on it, but for some reason you find that the IP address that was allocated to that instance got detached, or the EBS volume related to that instance got detached. So you know that you're finding for some entity that has done some API call related to the detachment of the EBS volume. So what I can do is, okay, I know that I need to find something related to that instance. I click here. I know something, I want to find something for detachment of the volume. So, okay, I say detach volume, and I say fetch report. So I know that Devang on this date, made an API call for detaching the volume, the request, so the volume ID here is shown for which instance, and the response, whether it was successful in detaching it. Similarly, we also have options here for enabling or disabling read-only events. The next report that we have is our custom report. As described earlier, a custom report is a report which enables the user to generate his own queries and create his own reports. So say I choose data for the current month. I say apply changes. So these are a few of the events that have occurred. Now suppose I want to generate a query where I'm listed with unauthorized calls that are being made to my environment. So as I click on filters, I create a group. A group is nothing but a label that will help you group queries together. So I say unauthorized accesses. I say create group. So what you can see here is we provided you with a list of fields on which you can provide or you can do a search. So you can see you can do a search on the user type, the user name, the source of the event name, error codes, and so on. So I say I want to find something related to unauthorized events. So I say error code. So I know if there's an error, it will be something related to the error codes. You can choose any of the operators that you would like to. So I say that is equal to. So I'm not very sure of the events, the name of the event that is related to error code or access denied. So I just search for one and we'll search the event that is related to it. Okay, I got something called as access denied. So I say add filter. Maybe I want to add something related to unauthorized access to. So I say unauthorized, I search for it. Okay, we have something related to say unauthorized operation. If you can see, we provided an operator here that is a simple AND or OR. I choose OR here and I say add filter. Once I've done this, okay, so the query that I've generated here is I'll be provided with data that fulfills the constraint of where the error code is equal to unauthorized operation or the error code is equal to access denied. I click on apply filters and I'm provided with a list of users who are trying to make unauthorized calls to my environment. Now I would also want to know the error codes, the request and the response. So we have also provided an option where you can actually choose the fields that you would like to see. So I say I also want to know the error code, you say error message, request, and the response. I say apply. So I will be provided with data that includes these fields: event name, source IP address, error code, the error message, the request, and the response. So now I know that the user, say Vivek, wasn't allowed to list hosted zones to make the API call. He was denied an access. And this was the error message. Now I see that a lot of API calls that were unauthorized are being made from this IP address. So there's a list of it, it's being repeated. So I would want to know all the operations that were done, all the unauthorized operations that were done using this IP address. So I go back up, I create a new group, say source IP address, create a group. Now I know I need to search for a source IP address, so I go to source IP address and say equal to this IP address. It's the add filter. So now the query that we've generated here is fetch data that fulfills the constraints where the error code is equal to unauthorized operation or is equal to access denied, and the source IP address is this. Let's say apply filters. So what I get is a list of all API calls that were made from this source IP address. Another thing that I would maybe want to know is only the list of users who are actually making unauthorized API calls to my environment. So what I can do is I'll disable this filter. So again, I have this filter running. So now the filter that I have is unauthorized operation and access denied. And so I just want to know the users. So I disable the rest of the fields other than the username. I say apply. So I get a list of all the users who are making unauthorized accesses to my environment. So the scenarios or the reports that can be generated from this report is actually depends upon the need of the user. A user can generate report as and how he wants. We also provide an option to download the result or the report that was generated. So you are provided with a download link. You either click on the link and download the report, or you can also share this link with other users that you would like to share it with. So this is all we have for CloudTrail on Cloudlytics. So we would like to take questions if you have any now. You can send us questions on the chat box that we have. You could either direct it towards Anuj, or you could direct it towards Blazeline Technologies, and we will try answering your questions.